Ever heard of a politician completely flipping their beliefs like overnight?
Oh, yeah. Happens more than you think.
Well, today we're doing a deep dive on Mike Johnson, a congressman from Louisiana, who went from being this outspoken critic of government overreach to, well, let's just say some folks are questioning what really happened after he became Speaker of the House.
Yeah, the guy did a total 180 on some pretty major issues,
And get this, our sources for this deep dive are actually two political commentators who were, let's say, less than impressed with Johnson's actions.
to put it mildly. Right.
Oh, exactly.
So we're going to be looking at two key areas where Johnson seemed to change his tune: FISA reform and funding for the war in Ukraine.
Okay, so first up, FISA.
Right.
For anyone who's not familiar, FISA basically gives intelligence agencies a lot of power to, spy on American citizens.
Yeah, it's been pretty controversial, to say the least.
And before becoming Speaker, Johnson was like super against it. He saw it as a massive threat to civil liberties.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
He was all over the media, giving speeches, really hammering home his opposition to FISA.
And it wasn't just for show, was it? These sources make it clear that his opposition to FISA, it ran deep.
No, yeah, they point out that he had a long track record of, challenging government overreach and really pushing for more transparency from these intelligence agencies. So for him, opposing FISA, it wasn't just some talking point. It was like a core part of his, political identity.
Yeah, which makes what happened next even more shocking. So just a few months after becoming Speaker, Johnson not only lets FISA get renewed without any of the reforms he was pushing for, but he becomes a vocal supporter of the law.
I know, right? I mean, he went from calling it a threat to democracy to calling it essential for national security.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild.
That's a pretty drastic shift. So what was his explanation for this sudden change of heart?
Well, according to Johnson, he saw some classified information that completely changed his mind.
Oh, the old "I saw something you didn't" defense. Come on.
Yeah, well, that's what he's claiming. He says he was taken to this, secret room at the CIA.
A secret room. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where he was shown this super top secret intel that supposedly, totally flipped his perspective on FISA.
Okay, so our sources point out that Johnson already had access to classified intel as a congressman.
Right.
And he's known for being a pretty smart, analytical guy.
Exactly.
So these commentators are saying that, they're skeptical. They're saying it's hard to believe that this secret intel was so earth-shattering that it would make him, completely reverse his position.
Yeah, it's not like he was going in totally blind
Yeah.
before, you know what I mean?
Right.
So it does make you wonder, was there more to it? Was there some kind of pressure or influence that went beyond just, looking at some new documents?
Right.
I mean, was there an or else involved?
And this isn't the only issue where Johnson seemingly reversed course. He also went from being pretty hesitant about funding the war in Ukraine to being, a strong advocate for more military aid.
This is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Our commentators are actually suggesting that these two policy shifts on FISA and Ukraine, they could be connected.
Oh, interesting.
They're pointing to a possible pattern of influence from, some powerful entities maybe within the intelligence community.
So they're suggesting that there are forces working behind the scenes to, shape political decisions that the public doesn't really see getting made.
Yeah, exactly. And to make things even more suspicious, one of the commentators shared a personal story about Johnson that really fueled their doubts.
What happened?
Well, they described this off-camera encounter with Johnson that they found super unsettling. It's like they said he was incoherent, and that the whole conversation left them with this feeling that something was just off.
Ah.
They didn't go into specifics, but, it obviously added to their concern about Johnson's transformation.
Yeah. Sounds pretty creepy. So we've got a politician who did a total 180 on two major issues, a mysterious visit to a secret room at the CIA, and a commentator who's convinced that something fishy is going on. I don't know about you, but I am definitely hooked.
Oh, yeah, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Buckle up. It's like we're seeing this, glimpse behind the curtain of Washington, D.C.
Right, like all these backroom deals and power plays that most people never even hear about.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, right, if it's happening with FISA and Ukraine, what other decisions are being influenced in ways we don't even know about?
That's a great question, and I think that's why this deep dive is so important. We're not just talking about Mike Johnson here. We're talking about how power actually works, how agendas get shaped, and how we can, become more informed, be more discerning as citizens.
Totally.
The commentators we're looking at here, they actually bring up a pretty interesting parallel to President Obama.
Oh, yeah.
They point out how he also kind of shifted his stance on some national security issues after taking office. Well, especially stuff related to surveillance and drone strikes, things like that.
Hmm. So are they saying there's some kind of pattern here? Like people come into power and then they get exposed to certain information or pressures that make them change their views?
Yeah, that's what they're suggesting. And they think this could be, especially true when it comes to national security. I mean, the stakes are super high,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of the information is like totally secret.
Right, right. It's all cloak and dagger stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's worth pointing out this isn't just a, Democrat versus Republican thing. I mean, both parties, they've had presidents who've been criticized for expanding executive power, adopting policies that some people see as, well, infringing on civil liberties.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it's not about left versus right. It's more about like the dynamics of power and how those dynamics can affect decision making no matter what party's in charge.
Exactly. And these commentators, they actually go even further. They suggest that anyone who challenges the status quo, who really disrupts the system, they might actually be seen as a threat by those in power.
Interesting.
They specifically bring up people like Trump, who they describe as like someone who pulled back the curtain, right? Someone who exposed how Washington really works, and that made a lot of people, well, uncomfortable.
Right, because it's like it challenges their power, you know?
Yeah.
So are they saying that people like Trump, who, they operate outside those traditional power structures, they're not afraid to challenge authority, are they saying those people are more likely to face pushback or even like attempts to, I don't know, undermine them?
Yeah, that's their theory. And it definitely lines up with the idea that, like, there are these powerful forces at play, forces that most of us, we're not aware of.
Right, like a whole other level of the game that's happening behind closed doors
Hmm.
makes you wonder, what can we actually do about it?
That's the question, isn't it? I mean, how do you fight something that you can't even see? The more we look into this Mike Johnson thing, the weirder it gets. Like, if someone like him, someone who seems so principled, so outspoken, if he could change his views so drastically, what does that say about the pressures and influences at work in Washington?
Yeah, it makes you wonder how much power a NOI elected official actually has when you've got these unseen forces pulling strings behind the scenes.
And it's not just about the politicians, right? The commentators we're hearing from, they pointed out how easy it is to sway public opinion, too,
Yeah.
especially with complex issues like national security.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They were saying that fear and uncertainty, those can make people way more likely to just accept whatever narrative they're being fed, even if it's not the whole truth.
Like, they use the example of the Iraq War. You know how the Bush administration basically used fear of terrorism and WMDs to get people on board with an invasion that, well, it turned out to be based on bad intel?
Right, which is a good reminder that we all need to be more critical, question the information we're given. Don't let our emotions cloud our judgment.
Especially when those emotional appeals are coming from people who have a vested interest in shaping public opinion. People who want us to see things their way.
And it's not just about government propaganda either. These commentators talked about how corporate interests, media outlets, even social media can play a role in shaping how we see the world.
So it's like this whole system, right, where information gets filtered and manipulated at every level before it even reaches us.
Exactly, and it's on us to be aware of that, to recognize the biases, develop those critical thinking skills so we can actually tell truth from fiction.
But how do you even do that in a world where we're constantly bombarded with information from every direction? It's overwhelming.
Well, I think step one is admitting that we don't have all the answers. It's okay to say, I don't know, and be open to learning new things.
And to challenge our own assumptions, right? Like, what beliefs do we hold that might be based on bad information? Stuff that we've just accepted as true without really thinking about it.
Exactly. It's about having that healthy skepticism, not just of official sources, but of everything.
Question everything. Who's presenting the information? What's their agenda? What evidence do they have to back up their claims?
And don't be afraid to look at things from different angles. Read articles from different sources, watch documentaries that challenge your views, listen to podcasts that make you think.
Yeah, don't just passively consume what's put in front of you. Go out and find information that pushes you, that makes you uncomfortable.
Exactly. And don't shy away from those tough conversations with people who see things differently than you do.
Oh, I know. Those can be hard.
They can be, but they're so important. They force us to really think about our beliefs, and maybe come to a more nuanced understanding of the issue.
It's not about trying to change anyone's mind. It's about having that open dialogue. That's how we learn.
Absolutely. So if there's one thing to take away from this deep dive into Mike Johnson and all this craziness.
It's that we can't just be passive observers.
Right. We need to be active, engaged citizens, people who are willing to question, to challenge, to think critically, and to keep searching for the truth even when it's hard to find.